Welcome to Grow Cookie to Range, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven mainly, and lots of guests, but today it's just me. And the exciting thing about today is not only are we going to do a recording of a mini-series on floristry and floristry techniques, and I'm going to show you lots of different things that we do every day here at Penhill, but also we're going to do it on screen. So if you're listening to it, that's great. But if you want to actually go and see me doing the stuff and see the beautiful flowers, then you can go to YouTube and watch it as well. And so today is a beautiful day, sunny, wonderful sort of high summer day. And so I'm surrounded by lots and lots of lovely flowers. So some rules of picking, first of all. So I actually picked quite a bit yesterday. And that is really, really important. So you want to pick ideally in the morning or the evening. So I picked yesterday evening. And then you want to condition, and I'm going to go on to that. And then you rest the flowers, really importantly, in water overnight. And people get that wrong. You don't want to pick plonk. You want to pick, condition, rest the flowers in cold water, deep water, and then arrange. So that's why I'm surrounded by lots of things, because I did it yesterday. If you have to do things last minute, then the conditioning is even more important. So out I went last night, picked everything that I know that I wanted to use, put them in water, and now I'm going to condition them. But normally I would pick, then I would condition, then I would rest them, and then I would arrange. But because I wanted to show you conditioning, I haven't conditioned absolutely everything. So the first thing also is you pick, or the second thing is that you pick into water. And I always use milk pails like this. If you use floristry buckets, they tend not to have handles, which I find really annoying. So with the milk pails, these are stainless steel champagne buckets or chandlery buckets, so they don't rust ever. But they're more expensive, but they're really worth it. I've had these for 25 years now. I bought a set 25 years ago, and they're still not a sign of rust, and they're really robust. But I use them every day, and I can put 4 on 2 arms, so 2 on each. And what I do is I strip 2/3 of the foliage into one bucket, and then I plop it into water in another bucket. So pick, strip, plop, pick, strip, plop. And that works brilliantly, and it's really, really time efficient. Walking down a line, and I don't tend to pick to the ground. I tend to pick above a pair of auxiliary leaves, because of course that's next week's flower as well. And you can actually see that with this. So this is a beautiful dahlia called Penhill watermelon. And so you can see all the different places I could have picked. So I could have picked here, and then an auxiliary bud would grow there. Or I could pick here, can you see that? And an auxiliary bud is already growing there, and they would develop into next week's flower. Or I could pick here, and the auxiliary buds waiting to develop there. In fact, I picked the one below it, which gives me a really big tall stem, which is fabulous. And it doesn't matter, because there'll be auxiliary buds below that, and they will grow to replenish the flowers that I've cut. And then I would strip almost all the foliage off, just like that. I love the shapes of the buds, so I tend to leave them on with dahlias, but actually they won't open, but I just like the shape. But I am quite radical in how much foliage I remove, because the leaves need to photosynthesize, they need water to do that, and so they actually, it takes more strain on the stem, and so the flower doesn't last quite so long. So you pick, and then you strip into a bucket, and then you plop them into water. So those are the rules of picking. Now, conditioning. When I get in, not everything needs conditioning. Truth is, dahlias aren't hugely long-lasting in a vase. This I get 5 days in a cool room, probably more like 3 or 4 in a hotter room. But we're developing dahlias like Molly Raven, Night Silence, etc., which have a better vase life. Anyway, so they stay in their water. But there are things that you can do to extend the vase life. And I'm just going to show you the first and most important of all, which is searing. And what that is literally, so I've got a kettle here that's just boiled, and I'm just going to fill up to almost the top of that mug. I'll put that underneath so it doesn't get in the way. And then a classic example of what you need to sear is a rose. So this is Rhapsody in Blue. And I always go for searing about 10% the whole stem length, so the height. So I'm going to go for about that. And that goes into the boiling water and I count to 5. So I've counted to 5 in my head. And then it goes into cold water to stop it cooking. So just like when you're, say, you're wilting some spinach, you put it in really hot boiling water and then straight into cold, and that keeps it lovely and green. Well, just the same with roses. So other things that need searing, really importantly, are poppies. This lovely, beautiful, amazing grey poppy. So again, sear, much shorter, 1, 2 into the water. But I'm going to put it back in there so it doesn't get bruised. And then phlox here, these 3 phloxes. So just strip the stem ends, just as like I showed you with the Dahlia. Doesn't matter if you're getting rid of some auxiliary buds because more will form. And give those 1, 2, 3 seconds and back into the cool water. So that's searing. And I just do that kind of every day. Literally every day. The kettle's on the boil here and we're searing every day. Obviously heat-proof vessel to sear them in. So that's the first S, searing. And what it does is it extends the surface area for water absorption. So just like if you hammer your stem end of a rose, it expands the area of xylem, the water uptake system of a plant, so that it can absorb more water by hammering. But actually by searing, you're doing just the same, but it's in boiling water, and so it actually kills all the bacteria in that area. So you prolong the vase life in a better way than hammering, because that creates a bacterial buildup on day 3, 4. So searing is the first thing and the most important. The next that we do quite a lot here with really wonderful bulbs that you want to last as long as possible, particularly amaryllis and more than anything lilies. And what you do is the next S is called sterilizing. And before the pollen ripens, you remove the anthers just like that. And what that does is it keeps the pollen off fertilizing the stigma in the center of the flower there. So it never gets fertilized, unless a bee comes along, of course, which it might, but it prolongs the vase life because it hasn't yet been fertilized. Once it's fertilized, the flower can die because it's potentially formed its seed. So by sterilizing it, you increase the vase life of particularly lilies, but we also do it with amaryllis. That's Lilium, speciosum, rubrum. It's a real beautiful variety for high summer days. So a lot of these things I would sear. Another one, Cabea, the cup and saucer plant, which we absolutely adore here. And I'm going to use it in one of the arrangements I'm going to show you in a little while. So these go in. Now, I've had this on the go now for 3 or 4 minutes, haven't I? So I now need to chuck it out, boil the kettle and replenish it. But that I've shown you enough about searing. So that plops into there because this is cold water in here. So number 3 S, so the third S. Now this is what you do with very large surface area plants like hydrangeas. And you don't plop them with the stem down and the flower up like you might imagine. It's counterintuitive. This is an amazing variety called Incrediball, and you can see why. It's a hybrid of Annabelle. And so they go in, flower and all, under the water. And we find this is really good for high surface area flowers like hydrangeas, but also peonies. I'm having a bit of a problem with my phlox, which I'll come on to. So these, strip the leaves and simply put them in a bath or the sink or wherever and just leave them for a few hours. I mean, quite often I leave them overnight. And what that does is it means that they absorb water over their whole petal surface. And leafy things like Cotinus, the smoke bush, ivy in winter, which have a big surface area, cornus even, I would do exactly this. And peonies are transformed and hydrangeas. And I discovered it actually from a peony shoot where the photographer I worked with, Jonathan Buckley, was sick and he didn't know he was going to be. So I'd already got to the peony nursery. This was nearly 30 years ago. And I'd picked loads of peonies in this nursery and I felt so guilty because then Jonathan couldn't come to the shoot. And I had to wait for him to get better. So I got home. I didn't know what to do with this vast amount of peonies. So I just chucked them in the bath, even white single peonies that look like they're really delicate. And I took them out the next day and started putting them around the house, and they lasted 10 days to 2 weeks. I then went back and did the same varieties and did them with other conditioning techniques like searing, and they only lasted 7 days. So it really, really does seem to work with lots and lots of things. Just make sure they're tucked under the surface of the water. So that's the next S. The final S is with amaryllis, which I haven't got here because it's summer and they're winter. I put a bamboo cane or a branch from the garden, very straight up the hollow. That's why I keep going like this. It's straight up the hollow of the stem because amaryllis stems are really, really chunky, but the whole inside is hollow. So you ease a cane up to the flower and it lodges just below the flower, and then I put a rubber band around the base of the stem to stop it curling like pig's tails. And that then means the stem ages after about a week, but the flowers go on with the buds opening for up to 3 weeks in a cool room. So it really makes a difference because with the ramrod, the cane inside the stem, of course, it means it can't go anywhere. So it doesn't bruise, because otherwise what I find with amaryllis on sort of day 6, 7, you come down in the morning and lots of the flower heads have collapsed over the side of the vase, and it's such a shame. You end up having to cut them down. So all S's. Searing is the most important. Submerging, we use quite a lot, but more species-specific things, I guess. Oh yes, and hellebores we definitely sear, so that's really another important thing. Sterilizing, the next S. Staking, the next S. Final S actually is swaddling with tulips in spring. They tend to do this, don't they? That their heads get heavy and they turn towards the table, which is a bit annoying if you've made a beautiful vase of tulips. What you can do with that is put a darning needle or a thick pin just below the flower and remove it, and that disrupts the growth plate. It can't then get lots of cellular division. The new cells don't have lignin and they're floppy. So on day 3, 4, the head starts looking at the table. So that's the final S. And swaddling them with newspaper and putting them in a narrow bucket just to keep the heads of your tulips completely vertical on their stem. And then if they're floppy at all, they just completely set in a rigid, completely upright position. So those 5 S's are the key things: searing, submerging, staking, sterilizing, swaddling. Final tip, because I was picking them today, is things like phlox, like this, which is a classic, and I'm going to use it in one of the arrangements later. Absolutely classic, wonderful, wonderful perennial cut flower. You don't need to do any conditioning at all. You just need to, just like I said, strip most of the foliage off. And then what you'll find is, because they flower for such a long time, you get a few going over flower heads. And what I find is if I just gently tap it on the table surface, it dislodges them quite well. And then I can just pick them off like that. Can you see? They just dislodge. They're a bit sticky otherwise. And so I just neaten it up a little bit like that. And then that is perfect. So that doesn't fit with the S's, but it's what you need to do with phlox. And these, in a cool room, will last up to 2 weeks, and they fill a whole room with the most beautiful, beautiful fragrance. But I'll use these in an arrangement later. So that is conditioning cut flowers. It's all you need to know. You don't need to go to an evening class for a term to learn about conditioning. Genuinely, we've done more trialling on conditioning here than almost anywhere else, certainly in the country, probably almost in the world, because I've been doing it for 30 years. And that's it. Those are the tips.